And I
Hello.
am starting the webinar. Just give me 1 second here.
Oh,
There's a little bit of a delay between when we hit the button and start. All right, good to go.
okay. Hello and welcome to the September 14th meeting of the Thurston Regional Housing Council. I believe we have a quorum. Why don't we start with the City of Tumwater, sorry. Tenino in the brain.
Hi, I'm Michael Towser, member of the Tumwater City Council. I'm also joined by Councilmember Joan Cathy, as well as Brad Medrud from our planning department. And let's see, I'm scrolling to see if our city administrator, John Doe, may be joining us as well, but I don't think he's logged on yet.
Excellent. All righty, let's move on to Olympia.
Good afternoon. I'm Jim Cooper from the City Council, and I'm joined by Councilmember Danny Madrone, our Housing Director, Darian Lightfoot, and our Assistant City Manager, Rich Hoy.
Righty. I don't think we have Yelm here. So I'm Carolyn Cox from City of Lacey. And we have here Rick Walk, who is our Community and Economic Development Director. And I think we may be it. I don't see Andy here today. So welcome, everybody.
Scott will be joining us shortly.
Scott will? Okay. Scott Spence. Okay. We get a motion to approve the agenda.
So moved.
Okay. Do you hear a second?
I'll second.
Okay. Any discussion on the agenda? Hearing none. All in favor of approving it, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Can I have a motion to approve the August 24th minutes?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, moved by Michael, seconded by Jim. Any discussion on the minutes? Okay, hearing none. All in favor of approval, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Motion carries. So let's turn it over to Tom and Keely and the funding recommendations for the HIN, CHG, and the 1277 RFP recommendations.
All right, I'll kick us off. My name is Keely Marino. I'm the Thurston County Homeless Response Program Manager. And tonight we will be discussing the funding award recommendations for 2 of those programs, the Housing and Essential Needs or HEN program and the Rapid Rehousing, which is CHG funds or Consolidated Homeless Grant. So just bringing us back to the end of June when the Community Action Council notified our office that they would not be renewing their contract with HEN or Rapid Rehousing, and also would no longer be providing coordinated entry for the single adult population. Our office kicked into high gear and have been administering the HEN program as best as we can. And I am auctioning off small dogs today. If anybody would like a small dog, I'll start the bidding at $0. Okay. So sorry about the dogs. We issued a letter of inquiry for those who might be interested in participating in the HEN, of just getting a sense from our provider community who would be interested in either facilitating the entire HEN program or partially so. In so doing, we did identify Partners in Prevention Education as a temporary interim HEN provider, as they indicated they could immediately provide services in the short term while we issued a request for proposals, which we did. We received 2 applications for both the HEN, Housing and Essential Needs, as well as the Rapid Rehousing for single adults. So I'm going to pull up that table for you, which is in your packet. So these are our recommendations. The two applicants that turned in applications specifically for the hen was Live Stories, who has been facilitating the payments for hen and our rent assistance program over the last 6 months. And they entered in an application for both these programs, partnering with Innovations Human Trafficking Collaborative. And then Catholic Community Services also put forth an application for both the hen and the rapid rehousing. You'll see here that Family Support Center is listed as coordinated entry. Last year, we were notified by Department of Commerce that the hen funds could be used to support coordinated entry. And so we did supplant coordinated entry with hen funds last year. And we reallocated the CHG funds that were originally allocated to coordinated entry to the REST program, which is the respite program that Interfaith Works has been operating for the last year. So that's where this ask is coming from. So Family Support Center put forth an application or a letter requesting some hen funds. They did ask for more than what they are going to be rewarded right here. They're suggesting somewhat of a reorg of the coordinated entry system. And so I'll break the awards down really quickly. So Catholic Community Services, as you can see by the scores, had a much stronger application for the hen program and the rapid rehousing. Catholic Community Services has been operating hen programs in 2 other counties, and so are very familiar with the process. And they put forth an excellent, very descriptive application for how they would administer those funds. What we do know is that the hen program is an extraordinary heavy lift with regards to just even the payments and ensuring that we have the checks going out to those who are currently housed. So as you can see across the board, our review team saw them as clearly the agency that would be awarded both the hen and the rapid rehousing funds. This estimated award of 2.4 million, and then down here we have the 200,000, but that is more around 175. We don't have a firm estimate on what funds can go out, as we are currently spending down those funds as we administer the hen program through pipe temporarily and through our office and with Live Stories. So we estimate it to be approximately $2.4 million that will go towards Catholic Community Services. Part of the decision to, and I will stop sharing. Part of the decision to not award the full ask for coordinated entry at this time is that there is a set aside every year in our regular RFP process for $225,000 for a coordinated entry. And that will remain in place unless something were to change, but I don't anticipate that. But that is a set aside that is for coordinated entry. And then as we have been administering hen funds, we have been very concerned, and Tom has taken the lead on this, how quickly the hen dollars are spending. So at this time, we estimate that in order for the hen program to remain on track all the way through the end of the contract period, which is the end of June 2023, about $210,000 need to go out to just maintain those who are currently staying in hen housing, accounting for some people will no longer be receiving hen because they're no longer eligible. 210 is the max for rent going out. An example of how much money has been going out. In August, I believe we sent out $290,000 in rent just for those who are currently housed in the hen program, not new intakes. And that was due to a number of those agents or a number of those clients having a significantly high number of months of arrears that had been accumulating. So our office and Live Stories have been working on assuring those who are currently in hen and who have been on hen are having all of their arrears paid, which is why the expenditure has been so high over the last several months. But with that high expenditure rate comes the concern that we're not going to have enough to cover those who are currently enrolled in hen all the way through the contract period. So we absolutely support the proposal by Family Support Center for expanding coordinated entry. Clearly, it is needed and necessary. However, we just want to make sure that we have enough funds in the account so that those who are currently housed within HEN will remain housed, and that we will have enough funds to ensure that rent payments go all the way through the contract period. So you have that table in your agenda packet, and that's where we stand with the HEN and the rapid rehousing. We are anticipating, with your approval, we will reach out to Catholic Community Services and immediately invite them to start participating in our weekly meetings so that we can ensure a smooth transition, as those who have been on the HEN have had quite a bumpy ride with the transitions that continue to happen. I feel like we're in good standing right now. And we just want to ensure that the next transition is as smooth as possible. So we're hoping that they can join us at those meetings. As for the rent assistance, there is no rush on those rent assistance funds. Those House Bill 1277, those are document recording fees that were passed by the legislature in 2021. Those funds will become available to our community once the remaining TRAP and ERAP funds are completely spent out. And we just received a bonus 2.5 million in those funds from Commerce that we have since amended the contract with Live Stories to pay out. And so until those funds are completely spent down, we will not have access to the 1277 funds. So we're in the middle of, we're right in the middle of that review process. We want to make sure that we do a thorough job for the permanent rent assistance provider. And we anticipate coming to you at the subsequent Regional Housing Council in 2 weeks with those funding recommendations. And at that, I'm happy to answer any questions you might have.
Anybody have questions? Michael?
Yeah, I have two questions. I guess what I don't understand is how what's the source of the arrears? Is that a result of the contract ending with CAC and then we couldn't find people or issue checks, or did that sort of predate that occurrence?
That predated that occurrence. So there were a few households that hadn't had rent paid since April of 2021. And so those were few, there were just a few of those, but they add up quite quickly. So those were in existence prior to the county taking on payment.
So the tenant hadn't issued the check, or the landlord hadn't cashed it, or the entity had not, like, I guess what the reason why I'm asking is I guess I'm curious if that is like an issue that is foreseeably repeatable, or if now, we've sort of understood what happened and have worked into the contract with the new provider ways to avoid that from occurring again in the future.
Yes, I believe that as we've been part of the heavy lift is just sorting out and making sense of all of the current all of the client files that we received, and ensuring that the W-9 and the payee, all of the things are in alignment. And so with those particular households that had a significantly high number of arrears, was, I think, an administrative issue rather than an issue, and therefore we hope corrected.
Okay. My second question is, HEN is, if I recall, not an entitlement program. So do we sort of foresee a point where we implement a wait list? Or what does that sort of look like when it becomes clear that if we took more people on, that we would end up spending more money than we have available to spend?
Yes, and thank you for bringing that up. It is not an entitlement program, and once the funds are gone, they're gone until the next year, when the July 1, when the contract is renewed. And currently, we have about 240 households, I believe, that are receiving HEN, that are on the HEN program. Over the last several years, Commerce had issued a waiver for eligibility checks. So that waiver ended on September 1st with a 90-day window for those who are no longer eligible to start making plans of how to transition off the HEN program. We did send letters out for those individuals. There were about 55 individuals that fell within that category. And then there is a wait list. So what we know is that approximately DSHS has done over 900 intakes for hen eligible individuals within Thurston County. Those are 900 individuals that could qualify for the hen program, yet have not either have maybe done an intake and gotten on the wait list, or have not. So yes, there is a wait list. We've been prioritizing keeping those in who are currently housed in hen within the hen program. Pipe has been doing some intakes, but we've been limited on the number of those just because we want to make sure that we don't overspend, and eventually folks inadvertently get kicked off the hen because there's just no funds left.
Sure.
So,
Sure.
yeah.
So that's 900 applicants, not necessarily 900 eligible people on a wait list. Like they might bust through the asset limit or not meet the definition of disability.
Correct. And I do believe this
Okay.
will be part of the transition with the new permanent provider. We have a number of pointers and a number of recommendations for the permanent provider to adopt as they move forward with the hen,
Okay,
including that issue.
thanks.
Anybody else have a question for Keely? If not, I want to take this opportunity to welcome County Commissioner Carolina Mejia, County Manager Ramiro Chavez, and Lacey City Manager Scott Spence. Did I miss any other new arrivals? Okay. Glad I didn't.
Do you want a motion, Carolyn?
Yeah, just getting there. Could I have a motion to approve?
I move the approval of the hen and rapid rehousing RFP as presented.
I'll second. Any discussion? Well, I just want to commend the county staff for all this work. I mean, it has been an unbelievable blizzard of things to do. So well done.
Thank you.
All in favor of the motion to approve the funding, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Motion carries. Alrighty, now we move on to discussion and potential action on the RHC governance. So, Tom, do you want to get us started on that?
I'm going to let Keely kick us off on this as well. Sorry, I'm in a hotel room in Burlington, Vermont. So Keely's helping me out tonight,
Oh, okay.
Yes.
but I'll jump in as if she needs some assistance.
And we have Rick here as well to help us out. Okay,
We did a dress rehearsal prior, so.
you guys are good.
All right, so we're going to be discussing the proposed governance structure, and we're hoping that we can have a vote today on the org chart as presented. So just as a reminder, based on direction that we received last Regional Housing Council meeting in August, there was some direction, some questions, and some additions that were discussed. And so we have added those. So I'm just going to show, I know you have the entire slideshow within your packet. I'm just going to pull up two specific slides that are in your packet that show the proposed flow chart of how the governance structure, what's being proposed to adopt as the governance structure. I cannot speak. Okay. All right, so this is on slide 9. This will look familiar. This came before you last month. Tom presented this proposed structure. So we have the things that have changed according to direction from last meeting is you'll see here on the Housing Action Team that there are 2 representatives rather than 1 as originally presented. And they are still indicated here as a non-voting members of the Regional Housing Council. So that is the change to this structure. So otherwise it remains fairly the same. We've got the advisory boards down below, which consist of the Affordable Housing Board Advisory Board, the Homeless Services Advisory Board, and the Lived Experience Steering Committee. So as a reminder, the Affordable Housing Advisory Board is the structure of which we will talk really briefly. We'll go over a draft charter we have for both of these advisory boards. Will look a lot like the Olympia Home Advisory Board that's already been in existence for 4 years. The staff lead will be the Thurston County Affordable Housing Manager and the housing manager from City of Ole. And then we have our Homeless Services Advisory Board, which is built also upon the model from City of Olympia, and the staff leads would be Thurston County Homeless Response Manager, that would be me, and another jurisdictional staff to help support that. The reason why the Lived Experience Steering Committee is centered between these advisory boards is that we hope to have membership from the Lived Experience Steering Committee on both boards, as well as that the steering committee is currently being developed. And so we're hoping that as they move forward and they're getting rather close to beginning their steering committee meetings, that it will become a little bit more concrete, the ways in which they'll be interacting with these two advisory boards and helping to, in the ways that we'll go over in the charter, how they would be participating on those advisory boards. Tech team remains the staff lead, the Regional Housing Council Manager, which currently is Tom Webster, and all of the jurisdictional staff that have been in supporting and acting as the technical team for the last 3 years. Over here, this box remains the same, which is the operational staff, which is all of the admin, and it calls out all of the individuals that would be in that supportive role on the Office of Housing and Homeless Prevention side. And then we've got the tech team feeding up to the regional exec admin, which is the chair, the vice chair, the Regional Housing Council Manager, the advisory team staff leads, the communication lead, and then any admin that we needed for those meetings as we set agendas, et cetera, for the Regional Housing Council proper, and then the Regional Housing Council. So pretty much the same as last time. Just wanted to point out that we did make that change there to including the hat, 2 members of the hat. Any
Yeah,
questions?
and Keely, on that, can I just sorry to jump in and just a kind of a small clarification on that, because I don't think that was discussed at the last RHC meeting.
Okay.
I know there's still some outstanding kind of question about that. That 2 representatives came out of kind of the RHC executive as we were preparing the agenda. That we kind of talked about that. We kind of said, let's put that in so it's clear how many members we were proposing. So I just wanted to be clarify that wasn't discussed specifically at the last RHC meeting, but at the RHC executive.
Thank
I
you.
wanted to clarify how many members we were recommending as non-voting members.
Thank you, Tom. All right, the only other change since last we presented this to you is there was a question about where does policy come from? So this big green box or rectangle over here indicates entities that could propose policies. And as you can see, it's rather broad. So we've got Regional Housing Council proper, the Housing Action Team, the advisory boards, the technical team, the Lived Experience Steering Committee, jurisdictional staff, and others. So it's pretty broad. Policy can be proposed in a number of ways, but just wanted to call out the membership on these very established entities and how to just establish that they are capable of making policy proposals. And if there's any questions on this.
I think that was one of the comments that I had was like, you know, who initiates the policy and sort of who sets the table in that sense. And this is helpful to sort of see this laid out in this way. I do think it's at some point, like, I guess the residual question I would still have is like, let's say someone from the public like proposed something, you know, what is the structure for like, I guess it's not clear to me how someone tries to navigate this process in a coherent fashion. Like if a member of the public wanted to, you know, propose, let's say hypothetically that they had some ideas for like tenant protections or something. That's the example I always use. And they wanted to get that moving at the RHC level to try to facilitate some kind of regional policy recommendation from this entity at the end, at the right hand of the diagram as the end goal. Excuse me, it's not totally clear to me whether, like, sorry, whether the advisory board needs to consider those things, whether the lived experience subcommittee needs to actually consider those things, or like I guess it's just the people who are at the table who decide whether that's worthy of consideration and worthy of moving it forward. And I don't think we need to get into this today, but you know, when we keep in mind for a future retreat or like a future, if we work on a future MOU in terms of like how these policy things are actually considered, like determining who sets the agenda and when they need to add something to it seems like an important power to me to have articulated at some point, so that, you know, when a member of the public has a good idea, that it has to be taken into consideration and at least thought about in structure. I don't think anyone on these boards would not take that step when someone comes up with a good idea, because we love good ideas around here. But sort of building in the architecture and the structure of how things are, you know, brought forward to that, I think makes sense in my mind.
Thank you, Michael. I have a couple of questions too. First question is, has there been thought given to how the representatives from Housing Action Team would be chosen? Do they decide? Do we decide? Do they apply?
I apologize. I think my internet might be going unstable. I only heard part of your question, if you wouldn't mind re-asking it.
Okay. How is it determined who from the Housing Action Team would be a non-voting member? Do they choose from within and just send representatives? Do we choose? Is there a vetting process?
We have, when we talk about the charter, we have broken down membership onto the advisory boards and how that process might go. We haven't gotten into the nitty-gritty around how representatives of the hat will be chosen to serve on the Regional Housing Council yet.
Okay, and might they be kind of rotating members? I think there was some discussion of that at one point.
Certainly a possibility.
And then the
Yeah, I think-
other,
Sorry.
oh, go ahead. Okay.
I was
the-
just
the
going
oth-
to say that would be for negotiation within the ILA. We would need to add that to the interlocal agreement. And so I think once we have agreement on the general approach, then there certainly is more details to how that would be implemented. It would need to be developed and negotiated within the ILA, those details.
So I'm glad you brought up the ILA, Tom, because my other question kind of had to do with that. Obviously, we'd have to redo it now to introduce this new governance change. And then we're going to have to come back again once we actually get the funding to get these other positions in place and formally get a director on board and staff. So I'm just wondering how you all feel about having to go through this twice.
Yeah, so I guess I would respond to say that we do propose this as an interim structure. And so this was something we thought we could implement relatively quickly. We understand there are kind of changes that would need to be made to the ILA, but the advisory boards could be stood up. Hopefully, you know, we talked last time about trying to do this by November. After kind of more consideration, that's probably not realistic. So we're probably looking to have these advisory boards up and running by April so they could start reviewing applications under the new RFP. They probably wouldn't have the ability to kind of influence or inform the priorities or the development of that RFP. After talking with members of the Homeless Crisis Response Work Group, They talked about the need for training for these advisory boards, making sure that these are stood up properly. And that's even getting these up in April will need to be a swift, will take some concerted effort. So wanted to mention that, as that's a little different than perhaps what we reported the last two, but we do see this as an interim structure, and we see kind of that longer term vision of developing the long term for the RHC to take a couple of years. You know, it is a complex process, so you know, we don't see us kind of doing this again kind of next year. We see that as a 2 to 4 to 5 year process, perhaps, you know, maybe not that long, but you know, we think it's going to take some time to do that. So this was a structure that we felt could be implemented relatively quickly while that longer term process is figured out.
Okay. Well, we are trying to build this plane as we fly it. So I would trust that we're going to learn as we go, and that we would have flexibility to make changes as needed on this. Okay.
Really quickly, oh, I'm sorry, Scott, if I could just add one more thing, and then I see you. Just that we did bring the draft charters to the housing action team, and there was some feedback, which I'll more specifically get to when we look at the charters, but one is relevant to this discussion, and there was some expression of not concern, but just noticing and a slight discomfort that the subject matter experts would be relied upon for their expertise, for their ability to make funding priorities, funding recommendations, and policy recommendations, and yet remain non-voting members on the Regional Housing Council. So in good faith did say that I would absolutely bring that up as a concern from some of the HAT membership today. And as that is relevant to this conversation and the charter, I just wanted to bring it up now.
Scott?
So maybe this is a question for Tom, this is more of a clarification. So you mentioned, I guess, to the Regional Housing Council that the structure, you'd use this as an interim structure. I mean, I assume the advisory boards and how the tech team is done. But if you're talking about even adding ex officio members to the Regional Housing Council, my interpretation is that would be an amendment to the interlocal agreement. So wouldn't that have to wait until we had a formal approval by all the jurisdictions?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, I do. Yeah, so I think some elements could perhaps be implemented more quickly, but certain, you know, the ILA would need to be amended for any ex officio non-voting members for the HAT, I think would be added. I don't know. I'd have to go back and we get some input on whether for the advisory boards, I don't believe something would need to be included. There's an interlocal agreement between City of Olympia and Thurston County around the home fund structure. So I don't know to implement the advisory boards, whether that would require an immediate change to the interlocal agreement, but I'm open to a legal opinion on that question.
Well, can I just push back a little bit? Like, there's nothing prohibiting us from having anyone at the table that we desire as part of the conversation, and that's all I see a non-voting member as. So I don't even think you need to update the interlocal for that, if that's the way we go. I'll bring that up in my questions in a minute.
Yeah, I'm just looking at the membership. Who's considered the membership? Who is the Regional Housing Council? I guess I think it's fairly direct in the interlocal agreement, but to your point.
So I have a couple questions, Carolyn, if it's okay.
Yeah, go if you're ready. I don't see but other hands raised.
Okay, so I'll kind of go from where we were. So I think on the ILA, this feels to me like most of it could be implemented without an amendment. I do think that we need to have the city county ILA in place though before we could implement this structure, even if we vote on it. So I'm curious where that is. My first question.
Ramiro?
We just received the final draft from the attorney for the City of Olympia. And I don't know when the particular agreement is up for approval by the city. So we're in the process of reviewing the final draft that we received from the city maybe a week ago.
Okay. Yeah, because I think stepwise that needs to be in place before this is implemented, even if we agree on it. And then so I really like this. I'll just say, so my stuff's a little bit nitpicky around the edges, and I really appreciate Darian for catching me up with us being gone at the last meeting. So my next question is, it's kind of strange to me to look at having two HAT members sit at the RHC when HAT isn't in the org chart. So is HAT part of the advisory tier of the org chart, or how does that connect to this org chart other than through those two seats?
I would say, and so, and Keely can walk through the charter when it's appropriate, kind of within the charter, those advisory boards also kind of call for representatives from the HAT to serve on the advisory boards. And there's, so I don't know if walking through the charter would answer some of those questions, but
Yeah, I'm
at
okay
this
waiting
point,
on
that we're
that. I
still
think
thinking of
that-
the HAT as a separate under Thurston Thrives from the Regional Housing Council.
Okay. Yeah, I think that it needs to either come into here in a dotted line or be called out as like the umbrella for some of that advisory structure, in my opinion. And then related to the advisory structure, do we have, are we having a conversation about all of the people who are in this system that aren't professionals getting stipends? Because that's one thing that we do in Olympia for all of our advisory committees. And so I would want to make sure that that continues and is expanded upon in the RHC work, especially given the fact that we're bringing our home fund advisory committee on board. Is that a conversation that's been had?
That is a conversation that's been had at a very high level and a recognition that more conversation is needed, but that's it needs to happen at this kind of at the RHC level. And so,
Okay.
we've
So I
not
think
really
for
had
me,
that conversation yet.
for me, the stipend is probably able to be part of the home fund admin, but it's an important equity piece, as is my next comment, which is putting two people from the housing action team onto the RHC makes sense to me, but that's not us giving up any power. And so I know that we've talked about equity in a way that is, pushing the envelope on what the elected officials can do with their power within reason for the funding sources. And I don't see a reason why we couldn't have a minority of the RHC be voting members from our advisory structure. And maybe that's a permanent structure piece, but to me, that's a pretty significant issue to not give a vote to the people sitting at the table in a way outside of just the elected officials. And then my last comment is I'd like to see it say RHC Executive Director. And I hope that our next action after approving this is to create a subcommittee and do a search for the executive director as soon as possible. So those are my comments. It's really good. I appreciate it.
Jim, can you back up to the comment you made just before the last one about executive director? I got a little lost in what you were proposing about voting members and.
Oh yeah, so all of the equity work, and I think we talked about this at the retreat that I'm in a part of, is about disrupting the institution that doesn't allow people to have access to the table. And part of that is us changing the power structure. And so for me, non-voting members is the normal way we would do things. The disruption. Can you still hear me?
Yeah, your face is frozen.
The disruption of the power structure would be to make lived experience and advisory board members or HAT members voting members at the board. And so if we have 5 elected officials, we could have 3 or so voting advisory member liaisons that vote at the RHC level. And I just think, to me, that's what I think I've been feeling in all of the equity conversations we've been having, and this seems like a great opportunity to do that with very little risk.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else have comments or questions? Ramiro?
Thank you. I had my hand up. Couple of thoughts, and let me go back to the conversation of the need to amend the ILA with the Regional Housing Council. And I totally agree with Councilmember Cooper. The interlocal agreement with the between the city of Olympia and county needs to go first. But that is just the instrument. That's how we're going to be combining the funds. And for the county to be the fiduciary responsibility of the home fund, the combined home funds. But the ILA must be amended because there is nothing in the current Regional Housing Council in local agreement that speaks about how the home fund will be managed and determined. So, and that is one of the requirements under the ordinance. The county Board of County Commissioners approved the home fund, directed me to amend the ILA to determine how the decision-making process of the recommendations will be put forth before the county commissioners within the RHC context. So that interlocal agreement must be amended, at least for that part. And I'd like to offer another thought related to the executive director, as Councilmember Cooper stated. I think the point, if I may, is when and if the Regional Housing Council becomes an independent organization. And that's what I think the executive director actually absolutely makes sense. At this point, any additional of the staff that supports the Regional Housing Council will be county employees. And within the county employees job description, we do not have an executive director for the Regional Housing Council. So if that is the direction by the Regional Housing Council, it will take us months to develop a job description, determine what the market salary will be, and go through the recruitment process. So I'd just like to bring a little bit of perspective related to that. And I understand the objective of the Regional Housing Council that at some point may become an independent organization, that at that point, absolutely the executive director will make sense. But I think we're a little bit behind that particular job description. Thank you.
Jim?
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate that, Romero. So do you have a director level title that we can use? Because I think, so here's how I see it. I've been told again and again that we're short on staff and we keep adding too much work, and we need to hire the person that wrangles this body and is in a leadership position equal to or above Tom Webster. And that's how I'd like to see the organization structured, and how I think my colleagues have been thinking about it. And I don't think we need to peel off in order to do that, but we need to get going on bringing in that body as soon as possible. We can't, we can write a job description quick. Now I get your point about the county HR system. I totally understand that, but things can happen. So do we copy the home fund manager position at the city and hire it right now so that we bring a person in the structure? Because besides the RHC needing its director and needing to know who reports to it, because that's gray in the interlocal, that we need to have the staff support.
And I think, if I may, you're making the argument to amend the ILA.
Yeah, well, sure, that's fine.
Because it's totally silent on everything you just described. And whether we can have, we probably have some positions in the county that we can find and modify in a way that we can expedite the hiring process. I'm just giving a perspective, creating a brand new, and I appreciate the streamlined process you described, Councilmember Cooper, cut and paste the job description and it's all done. HR doesn't work that way, if I may, at least in the county.
Does in my shop, but okay. All right. Thank you for that. I really appreciate it. I just want to reemphasize that the RHC is asking for a position and has been asking for it for months, and we need to do it even if we don't have the I's crossed and the I's dotted and the T's crossed. We have the funding source, and I don't understand why we haven't staffed up to support this new work. So thank you.
Okay. Anybody else want to weigh in on this? Are you feeling like you're ready to make a decision today?
I have a quick question.
Sure.
I'm just curious about changing the ILA. Just based on like, some of the conversation I've heard, it seems like it's something that needs to happen from my perspective, but is there disagreement among us that something needs to change in the ILA? Okay, I just wanted to check on that, and it might be helpful to put all these next steps into some kind of a timeline to be clear on like when each thing is going to end up coming forward, so that we all can be assured that like that these steps will happen.
Good points, Danny. Thank you. Anybody?
So Carolyn, I
Also-
guess the two things that I suggested that I need before I could make a motion or pass this is, did you guys talk about, or did you all talk about having voting members from our advisory structure when we were gone last month? Is that something people are open to?
At last month's meeting, and I went back and read the minutes on this, I think we were all pretty clear that it should be the electeds that actually have the vote. And that's because of our responsibility, ministerial responsibility over public funds. And
Except we don't have over any of these funds, the county commissioners do.
well, but by association, we do. I mean, obviously the commissioners can make a different choice, but essentially we're doing the footwork for them and handing it off, and they are.
If they make a different choice, it comes back to us
Exactly.
by
Right.
definition, and then we have to make another choice. And then if they make a different choice, it comes back to us again.
So I guess I'm confused then, because the structure that brought us to the RHC was one where the county commissioners had given that delegation of making a recommendation to a body that didn't have any official elected officials in its membership. And so what makes us think that we're the only ones that can make a funding recommendation? I don't understand that.
I guess I sort of see the other side of that coin and that story a little bit differently. And that, like, my recollection of like this entire thing sort of came to be, at least at the beginning when it was sort of the ad hoc, was because the decisions that were being made did not have, like you said, representation from elected officials in terms of making those recommendations and those funding decisions. And that was a concern because when there's public dollars involved and no public accountability, explicit public accountability, that's what generated at least some of the concerns that we had from our neck of the woods, was that if
sense.
like if a poor decision is made, then the accountability is at the ballot box. It's the elected officials deciding how these funds are going to get spent. And if funds are spent in a poor manner, then, that's on us because maybe we didn't do our due diligence, or that's the risk we run by being a part of this entity that makes funding decisions, that makes tough choices. So, I think like from the beginning, it already always seemed sort of clear to me that these decisions were going to be made by the RHC members, because in my mind, that's sort of what brought us together, was that there needs to be robust fundamental accountability behind the formula, behind like choosing where the dollars go. I do think that I would say, I understand the symbolism of having votes here, but I also think that like the power in this structure, that like having not elected officials involved at the beginning of the process means that, we have not, in the couple years that we've been on this body, I can't really recall a single time where we haven't endorsed the recommendation that has come before us. Except for, the one time where staff recommended that we go a different way in light of current events that made that recommendation different from what the first recommendation was. So in my mind, by building in the process where elected officials aren't in the room in the beginning where the recommendations are made, like that's going to be what carries the water at the end of the day.
Yeah.
Because we haven't ever swayed from the recommendations that have really come our way. So, I understand the symbolism behind having some folks sitting at the table and being voting members in that sense. But I think that like the power at this table is actually at the beginning of the process, not the end.
Yeah, I'll bite on that and yield for now, Michael. I think the challenge I'm having is, what difference does a minority make? And honestly, in all technical terms, this is an advisory committee that makes no final or binding decisions for anyone. And so, to me that's significant, but I totally get what you're saying. And so then my only other change that I'd like to see is a dotted line or an oval added to the advisory board layer that has the housing action team, because I think we committed to them that we would figure out how to bring them into our organizational chart. And I just don't feel like having a bullet as 2 non-voting members quite captures it. So I think it just either a dotted line coming in from the outside the form that says hat, or one that, or adding a bubble in that lower tier. And to me that feels good. And then I'll work on my other issues in the long-term conversation. Thanks a lot, Michael.
I was gonna say, I think there's also, like we have the structure with the county where if the county goes in a different direction, then it comes back to us and we get another bite at the apple. We can't just deviate unilaterally. We could also build that structure in with the advisory committees so that if, there are concerns that we have at our level, that we can't just divert and go a completely different direction. We could send it back and build that structure in as a stringent requirement. Instead, that could be another way to build in more accountability and inclusiveness and more merit to the recommendations.
Yeah, it puts a little power in their lap. I like that.
Yeah. And Jim, I just would point out to your comment about the lower tier here. Housing Action Team is represented in both the Affordable Housing Advisory Board as well as the Homeless Services Advisory Board, called out in each one. So I'm not sure.
But
What
just
more?
how do they fit in then? Like, they're not on here, so how can they recommend people to our structure? Like they need to be on here somehow. I don't really care how it's drawn.
I guess I'm not understanding your point.
It is the advisory structure that we have been using, and we have spent like a whole year getting their input to build this model, and continually they have said make us part of it, and here there's like a couple of nods, but it's not on there. Like that's just how I read it. I mean, all of those subcommittees just aren't part of this anymore, or HAT and its structure is in the organizational chart as we talk to them about in an ongoing way. And this is little compared to passing it if you really need it passed, but frankly, I think we got to wait for the interlocal with the city anyway. So
Are you asking whether HAT will become part of this as opposed to being part of Thurston Thrives? I don't entirely, or are you just saying that like
I'm just
the
saying they
word
need to
HAT
be here.
needs to
That doesn't
be-
affect their Thurston Thrive relationship at all.
Okay, so you're not asking that. So you're
But
just saying
they're
that
an
like
entity that we recognize. Within them is the continuum of care, and that's not here. I mean, there's a whole bunch of our structure that's not showing up here because of HAT not being here.
right. So what you're saying is that under those two in the lower section of the org chart, where there's the lived experience and then committee and then the other two committees, you're saying that HAT should be called out in those two, like just the word HAT. the
Well, what I
acronym
would say
needs
is,
to be-
ideally a bubble that says Housing Action Team of Thurston Thrives, if that's what they officially are. Or, I could see also like an arrow that's feeding up into the structure that is Housing Action Team of Thurston Thrives. But if, that's, I think that's to me, that feels like an obligation that we've made in our conversations with them. Where's the continuum of care here?
Looking for hands. Does anybody have?
There are two hands, Darian.
Darian
has
and
waiting-
Ramiro.
And then Ramiro,
Okay.
yes.
Why don't we try Darian and then Ramiro?
Thank you. Yeah, I just wanted to highlight again that Keely and I went over the structure and the charter with the hat this morning. And it was strongly encouraged that they would desire to be voting members on the RHC. They felt that that is what came out of the retreat. And they did not feel that it was a true picture of them being seen as non-voting members. And they hoped that we would advocate for them here to be voting members per their voice and their request at the retreat. So I just want to echo what Councilmember Cooper had said, that that is indeed what the hat is looking for. Thank you.
Thanks, Darian. Ramiro?
I raised my hand on behalf of Commissioner Mejia. I have her on my cell phone. Her connection was lost. So she's ready, if Madam Chair, to give a perspective. Go
Thank
ahead,
you.
Commissioner Mejia.
Can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Okay, I apologize. My connection kept coming in and out. And so I grabbed bits and pieces of the conversation. I'm going to make a recommendation that this conversation be, I think there's still a lot of questions that need to be answered. And I would suggest that we set this for the next RHC meeting and have a bulk of the discussion. I agree with Councilmember Jim Cooper, and I believe that the ILA needs to come first, but I also agree with Councilmember Marco Outhauser where in terms of where the voting is at. So I think there's still a lot of things we need to straighten out before we pass this. So I guess I'll make a motion to set this for the next RHC meeting.
Anybody want to second that motion? If not, I will, because we only have 3 minutes and there's clearly a long way to go on this. So,
I second.
okay. Alrighty. So in favor of putting this off till our next meeting, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay. So we have 3 minutes. Anybody have any?
Carolyn, can we go? Can we get someone to go back to the minutes and talk to the facilitators? Because I agree 100% with the hat. The conversations we had for the last couple of hours at our retreat were about sharing power. And I mean, maybe Michael's pass back for decisions gets at that in the bigger picture, but can you please, can we just confirm what came out of the retreat in the minutes, and that this is what I walked away with, that we're going to reinvent how government does this. And I'm not hearing anyone saying they want to do that now. And it hurts a little bit.
Alrighty, who's the keeper of the retreat minutes?
Keely and I have the report from the Athena group. We can go back and pull that out and have a couple slides next RHC meeting to go over the findings there. Keely, does that work for you? Great. That's okay with you, Councilmember Cox?
Yeah, maybe could you send it out to the members again in case
Yeah, absolutely.
they've been misplaced? Kind of lost in the shuffle. All right, thanks, Jim. And anybody have anything else for good of the order? If not, I'm prepared to give you 30 seconds.
I would
Gift you-
just, if I could jump in, sorry, Councilmember Cox, is we
That's
didn't get a
all right.
chance to review the charter. And we don't have time tonight, but we did put in a draft charter. I would just encourage you to kind of look that over. If you have comments or questions, please share those with us. We can go on those in more detail in a future meeting. So we didn't get a chance to go over them tonight, but if you have an opportunity to read those and have questions or suggestions or thoughts, please share those with Keely or myself or anyone on the tech team.
Thank you, Tom. I'll entertain a motion to adjourn. All right.
So
Jim
moved.
moved.
I don't know if we need one, but so moved.
All right. All right. Hearing no objections to adjourning, why don't we call this meeting over with and come back next time ready to dig in. Thanks, everybody.
you.
Have fun in Vermont, Tom.